It's a Stone Roadie show. All the skin formation that you need to know. Greg's got it all, so don't you go. It's time for the Stone Roadie show.
It's time for the Stoned Roadie Show with Craig Reed and Griff Martin.
The Stone Roadie Show, podcast 312. Action. Alrighty then, fellow Stone Roadie Dimension. Looky here. My name's Craig Reed, a.k.a. the Stone Roadie. When with me, as always, my co-host, my co-pilot, and the rocket scientist, Griff Martin. And looky here, who we got with us today. It's Mikey Sparks, and welcome back, Mikey Sparks. Been a long time seeing you on the Stone Roadie Show. So I think Griff's got a few we posted on FakeBook. Anybody had any questions for Mikey? And I think Griff, you got a few questions for Mikey there, do you there, buddy?
Yeah, I got a few questions, but I thought we'd do a little background for people that didn't watch Mike when he was on the last time, just kind of catch everybody up. Mike in musical instruments, as far as he was the guitar roadie for several different bands, Lynyrd Skynyrd, 38 Special. Who else did you do, Mikey?
Hank Williams Jr. I went to Japan with Hank Williams Jr.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about that, yeah.
The Confederate Railroads from Chattanooga, Tennessee, a country band. I did about 6 years with them. And I did a band, Lone Star, from Texas for a couple years. And then I worked in Nashville as a cartage guy. And that's just a person that takes musical equipment to the studios for the studio musicians. I did that almost 15 years. So I've been...
And as far as Lynyrd Skynyrd goes, you did the Rossington Collins, and then you went into the tribute band. Then you left, and you came back to the tribute band.
He also did the Alan Collins band too. It was just me and Mikey basically did the Alan Collins band and Rossington Collins band.
That's right.
Yeah,
nothing but good times.
And you were like one of the.
And that's Mikey. I'm showing that's Mikey there with all the cases there. Yeah.
You want to talk about that picture there, Mikey?
Well, the band wasn't doing anything, so I was working at repairing icy machines. I can work with tools and stuff like that, and the band was decided to start rehearsing. So I just take off of work and go over and do the rehearsal and set everything up. And finally, the people at work said, "Hey, man, you're not working. You're over here hanging with this band." So I quit. But that's why I got that little uniform on.
Well, how did they find you? How did they find you, though? I mean,
well, we're in Jacksonville.
You were doing icy machines, and they heard you were good with machinery, or what? How did you get involved?
Oh no, I needed to make a living.
Well, how did they Skynyrd find you?
Oh,
Artimus.
Well, originally?
Yeah.
From the very start?
Not Skynyrd, but the Rossington Collins band, I guess, because that's where you started.
Well, I was in the Marines with Artimus.
Okay.
Back in 1968 to 1972. We were Marines together.
Yeah, we went over that.
You were in a band with Artimus, weren't you?
Yeah, we were in bands together. And
what's kind of funny is Steve Reynolds told me a little story about you. He said that on Jacobs Avenue over there, you had finagled a couple of Coke machines and you turned them into the beer dispensers. And you had a couple Coke machines in that Jacobs studio over there.
I don't know about that, man, but we might have, I don't know, we might have had a beer machine.
He said he took them after you left. He took those machines.
Well, I can fix them, I can tell you that. I know all about Coke machines.
You don't remember that, Mike?
No, that was we were trying to get a band together there, man. Yeah,
so what you were telling me about that Confederate flag while you taped that on that box.
Yeah, on the road case behind Craig's head right there.
Yeah.
That Confederate flag, somebody threw it on stage, and I stuck it in my pocket, because you can't leave T-shirts and stuff lay on the stage because the band might be walking backwards and trip over them. That's why roadies always go get drumsticks or T-shirts or anything thrown on the stage, because the guys playing their guitars, they're not paying attention.
Right.
They walk backwards and they might trip over a T-shirt and fall back, hurt themselves or something. So anyway, that Confederate flag, I taped it on the back of Alan's 412 cabinet, his main cabinet, so I could tell that was Alan's as opposed to the other ones. I mean, we had little marks on them, but that one, is quite obvious. And so when we stacked those road cases up behind Craig there, Alan wasn't going to be in the photograph for the tribute band. And I put that flag up there to represent Alan in that photograph. So whenever you see that tribute photograph, that flag, that means Alan's there with all the guys, because he didn't make it to the photo session. That's my mind. That's why I did it.
Your way of bringing him back.
Yeah, and it's a little
like tribute to Alan.
Yeah, a little tribute to Alan right there.
And you said that there was a guy working with you, and he ended up being a horn player, but he was like saying, "Man, this is some hard work." And you said, "Well, it's even harder when the cases are full."
He wanted to be a drum roadie or something, didn't he?
Yeah, his name was Don, I think.
Artemis's friend or something.
Artimus's friend. And he was a good enough guy, but he wasn't a roadie type. We let him do it for a little bit.
and we were talking about, I think it was the last podcast or the podcast before, and we were talking about Bernice. And Craig said, that's the question for Mike Sparks right there, because I guess Craig had left Bernice plugged in on the stand at the recording studio, and somebody walked by and kicked the cord and knocked it over and broke the neck. And I asked Craig, I said, well, the guy that fixed it, I think he was like some kind of a maintenance man or something. He wasn't even like a guitar guy.
No, he didn't work there. He was just some guy there had some glue.
Yeah, and so I wondered if you could see the break in the neck. And Craig said, well, you got to ask Mikey that. So
yeah. You could see where it was broken, but it was a pretty clean break. The way those Gibsons are made, when you break a neck, sometimes you can just slip them right back together again and not hardly see the break. But the guy, I guess, glued it with some good glue, and he put two little black screws in the headstock next to the truss rod covers, to just reinforce it. So when you look at Gary's Bernice or the copy of it, there's two little black screws that are helping to hold that neck. But he did a great job on that, because that thing stayed in tune really well.
So
Bernice.
So you can verify that repair as being a good repair then, huh?
To me, it was. It stayed in tune great. I never had a problem with it.
And I guess it was never taken apart and repaired, correctly. I mean, you would say correctly, but he must have done it correctly if he kept it in tune. But I guess it's still like that in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, there are different ways to fix that, because it's very common in Gibsons to break like that. Sometimes they route it out and put extra biscuits in there to hold. They call them biscuits. But it was just, in that case, use some good glue, clamp it really good, and it turned out really well. Did
Gary ever talk to you about the guitar and how it got broke or any of that? Did he ever tell you the story of it?
Yeah, just that it fell over, and it's pretty common with a lot of drunk people around. People who've been drinking to knock over guitars, okay? But,
well, I left it. We left the recording studio at Criteria.
Criteria.
I wasn't really no guitar roadie. I didn't know no better, and I just left it plugged in. Didn't figure anybody would be in there, and we left and come back, and it was kicked over, and
What was it? Pretty colorful? Like, did it have all the color? It was a sunburst, wasn't it?
It was, I think it was a 58. I don't know if it was a 58.
It's a 59. I thought it was a 58 too, but it's a 59. Yeah.
But I think they would call that a tea burst. It's more like a watered down tea color than a red sunburst, It
was like a cherry sunburst, but it was still in good shape when you were working on it.
Oh yeah, super good.
The lights and all that. Really
it's completely faded now.
You don't
have a picture of it, Craig? You don't
I
have a
don't.
picture.
I don't have one. No. Well, I do, but not handy.
Yeah,
I have one on my phone, but I'd have to get my phone down. But I call it's kind of like a T-burst, but Gary liked gold hardware too. So all the hardware has changed to gold. See, Gibson custom guitars have gold hardware. The rest of them have silver hardware. Well, Gary took the silver hardware off his 59 and put gold hardware on there. So Gary's got a gold bridge and a gold tailpiece and a gold pickup covers and a little gold piece holding the pick guard on and gold tuning keys. And that's Bernice.
Were you there when he retired, Bernice?
I don't think so. I think I was Roadie and Bernice, and when Gary Smalley took my place when I ran off to the Confederate Railroad. I think Gary knew a lot of guys at Gibson, so they got Gibson guitars to give them some Les Pauls, and Gary started using other Les Pauls. There's me and Paul.
Yeah, there's old Paul. Yeah, and I was also talking about Jeff Carlisi's Explorer, and I was telling the story about how he couldn't afford an Explorer, and he knew a guy who built guitars, and Alan said, well, take mine and just, take it to the guy and then have it made just like this. And you're one of the few guys that, got to handle Jeff's guitar, and I was asking you a little bit about it because I know it's not made out of a Carino wood, it's made out of the mahogany, and then it's got that rosewood inset in it, and you actually used to tune that for Jeff, huh?
Oh yeah, for a couple of years. That's a beautiful guitar. I love that guitar, and it's a custom guitar. And I'm not sure if Alan Chester made that in Jacksonville, Florida.
I can't remember I had it written down.
But
Yeah,
he made guitars for that Molly Hatchet guy, that Hubeck, Bluebeck, whatever.
Dave Lubeck.
Yeah.
Dave Lubeck. Yeah.
Yeah, he made guitars for him. But Alan Chester did our guitar repair in Jacksonville, Florida. He cut nuts for us, and
This guy's name was Ryan, Jay Ryan.
I think Jay Ryan was up in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's the guy that made it, Jay Ryan.
That was a really, really good guitar. I love that guitar.
Was it wider than an Explorer?
It actually seemed thinner to me.
Was it thinner?
The top was real flat on it. It didn't, on an Explorer, the top's flat, but it almost feels like it has a little bit of a bout in it, but I can't say enough about how beautiful that guitar was. One funny thing about that guitar, we were doing a show, and like I said, Max Carl took Don Barnes' place in 38 Special. And one of the very first shows, he took a mic stand and flipped it up in the air. And the mic stand had a big heavy bass on it, and it hit Jeff's guitar neck right at the 5th fret, right where the marker is, right between the frets, and it broke the binding. And the binding was like 3 pieces deep and 2 pieces wide. It was a custom binding, but it put a big ding in the neck and broke that out. But the guitar stayed in tune. So Jeff could still play it, but it had this big hole where your thumb would flop down in there. And I did take it to Alan Chester, and he fixed it. He repaired it. I think it was right at the 5th fret. But that's so funny how the guitar was so solid that it hit and it broke off the binding off the neck, and it was still in tune enough to finish the show. It's a good guitar, beautiful guitar too.
Well, the body of the guitar, I think, is bigger than an Explorer because people always, I think, were kind of laughing about it to him. They were saying, man, yeah, that big old huge guitar of yours, but that thing's heavy.
Explorer's a funny guitar, because if you got a small person with an Explorer, boy, it looks huge. But if you get a big old guy with an Explorer, it doesn't look that huge. Charlie Daniels is the same way with the Les Paul. Gary Rossington with the Les Paul looks normal as all get out. But Charlie Daniels with the Les Paul looks like a little mandolin on his belly.
Yeah.
So looks depends on who's playing it, really, as far as what it looks like. Big old tall Alan, that Explorer fit him perfect, And, he always flipped that strap around, on the front of the guitar there. he didn't have it on the back. He flipped it around to the
Yeah,
front.
why did he? I wonder why he did that.
Well, that kept the guitar from leaning forward. That guitar wants to lean out away from you, you know.
Oh, okay.
And the strap would hold it flat back up against you. But yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got their tricks that they use, you know. That
They
picture that you got up there, Craig, where'd you guys take
Mikey,
that at?
well, I thought we were in El Paso, Texas, but Mikey says we were in the Playboy Hotel or something. Where were we, Mikey? There,
Wisconsin, up there, Alpine Valley, up. I don't know.
Alpine Valley. Yeah.
Anyway, there's an airstrip right outside the window. If we looked out the window, we would look down on the runway, kind of at that hotel right there. But yeah, that's a day off. And
Who took the picture? Did you say a timer?
I had it. I had a camera. It was either mine or Mikey's. We had it on a timer and took a picture. It was a new camera, and we were.
you kind of experiment back then, with the timers. and
the
stuff.
timer.
Was that like an old 35 millimeter
Yeah.
Canon or Nikon or something?
That was probably 1987, 88. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So what have you been up to lately there?
Well, I'm retired.
Yeah,
But I play my guitar. My wife and I closed our, we had a children's store. We closed our children's store and got rid of all that. But she wants to open a new one. So we're looking into opening a new children's apparel retail store here in Hendersonville, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. But I don't do anything in the music business other than play the guitar. And
did you ever run into Ed King while you were there much? I mean, did you just because
not a lot, but I ran into him probably 10 times.
Yeah.
And
just like
we got along good. I loved Ed, and his wife, and Ed was nothing but a good guy to me.
Matter of fact, there's a guy in some of the questions here, and his name's Randy Moore, and he says he wants to know setup tips for Ed King's guitars. What kind of special stuff did you do for Ed? Anything?
He had Pence's Sir guitars, and they're high quality guitars.
Yeah, Pops said he hated that guitar.
Well, they had original Floyd Rose whammy bars on them, and the original Floyd Rose had machine parts. In other words, machine steel and stuff. Where when Floyd Rose sold his patents to Fender, they started making cast metal parts, and cast metal parts aren't nearly as strong as machine parts. But I didn't mind working on his stuff, and he had PRSs, which were just standard Paul Reed Smith guitars. And like I said, he had that Rickenbacker 12-string. We put it on a Gracie stand. All guitar roadies and guitar players know what a Gracie stand is, the name of a company that makes a stand that you put guitars on, and you can walk up and play it and walk away from it. And, Ed had some very nice acoustic guitars. Ed had a precision bass, and he loved playing bass. I love playing bass, and just mandolins. But there was nothing special. He used 10 to 46 strings. That's a 10, 13, 17, 26, 36, 46 on the strings. And go ahead.
He was pretty easy to please, to keep happy as far as long as you were in tune and everything, and no problem.
Keep it in tune, man. String it up, keep it in tune, keep it clean, and Ed would kind of set his own amp. He'd set his own reverb levels, and he was particular about that. But he would do it himself, And Ed is kind of a self-sufficient guitar player, where some other people, aren't, don't do very much with their guitars and stuff. But Ed was a hands-on kind of guy. But he didn't fool around. We didn't fool around with neck adjustments and stuff like that. They were real solid guitars.
Ed was the only one that used reverb. I never used reverb on any of the other guys. Yeah,
he had a little rack with his reverb in it.
Oh, he didn't use the regular standard reverbs
No, he was using those Paul Reed Smith amplifiers. He didn't use the Peavey. Even though we took his Paul Reed Smith amplifiers and put that Tortex stuff around it to make it look like a Peavey, but it was a Paul Reed Smith, and he had a rack, and we put a reverb unit in there, and he would usually adjust his reverb from 11% to 13%. It just depended on how dry the room was and how much reverb he wanted. But it was you know, he was a little picky about it, but he was picking himself about it. You know, he'd go, "Oh man, I should have put another 1% of reverb on." Who could hear that? You know. But,
and the strings, did Ed, you say he used a lighter string?
No, he used the same strings as all the Skynyrd guys used, those 10, 13, 17, 26, 36, 46.
Yeah.
So on the Strats, they used a 9, didn't they? 9, 11, 13, 16. Or
who did that?
On the Strats, didn't they use lighter strings on the
No,
Strats?
I think I used a regular gauge on everything, pretty much.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a guy in the comments, Tony Patrick. He wanted to know about the strings, and he also mentioned a guy's name, Curtis Lauer, Laur. Does that sound familiar to you?
Maybe he's trying to write Curtis Lowe.
No, I don't think so. No stories of working with Curtis Lauer. And then Brandon Campbell, who he works with Fortune Child, that band that I'm going to go see this weekend. And he says, please tell the fans about Gary Smalley with what all did he do for the tribute band, a true Jacksonville legend.
Oh, Gary Smalley, you know, he worked over at the American Music Store, and I'd go over and talk to him and see him, and he was a great guy. He had a collection of Gibson lap steel guitars. His wife was wonderful. You know, I met her over at the store, and he was very soft-spoken and just a gentle soul, you know, and you know, you could tell he wanted to go rock and roll, but you know, he had a family and he had obligations, and he played in a band called the Roosters, and they were a hot little band in Jacksonville. And
wasn't Donnie in that band for some time or something? Seemed like I heard
he was in Red Rooster. That was
band. These guys were the Roosters. I don't know who was in the band. Maybe Joe Limp, Joe Crimp. I don't know his name.
Crimp. Yeah.
Well, you know, Leon would go Joe Limp, you know, because everybody had a made up name with Leon speaking. Because he was the joker, you know, he always could antagonize and get a joke. But Gary Smalley, he was a good guy. So when I quit the Skynyrds, he came on and became the Guitar Roadie. And I'd go over and see him after working for Skynyrd, and he'd go, "Man, I know what you mean." You know, we were talking about we were in Tokyo, or we were in Japan somewhere, probably Tokyo. And the band got drunk, you know, and they were acting like jerks on stage. And they're going up to the microphone and going, "Oh, yeah, we kicked your ass in the war." You know, they were just being, you know, they were drunk and they were just saying stupid shit. And all I can say, one gig, Gary Rossington was kind of out of it. I mean, he was playing, but in between songs, he would leave his guitar turned all the way up and let go of the strings, which meant his amplifier would just feed back and rumble and blah, blah, blah. Or he'd run across the stage to push, you know, Randall or something like that, and be banging on his guitar strings without really playing music, you know. And you know, Dale was looking at me. She's like, "Fix his amplifier. What's wrong with his amp?" I said, "There's nothing wrong with his amp. It's him. He's making all that shit sound coming out." I mean, he was stumbling around, running into things, and it was just like that. So after the gig, I got pissed off, and instead of getting in the van and going back to the hotel, I just walked away. You know, we're in Tokyo, you know, 2:00 in the morning, and I just said, "Fuck these guys." I just walked away and took a walk to calm down for about 2 hours and walked back to the hotel, right? And then I'm talking to Gary Smalley after he was working for him, and he said he was in Berlin or somewhere, and the same thing happened. He said when the gig was over, he said, "I packed the shit up and just went out and just walked away from him because I couldn't stand it being around him anymore." And I said, "Yeah, man, I know exactly what you mean." Gary and I had really good conversations, and we related to each other. And he was a great guitar player and a super, super good guy. But I think he had bone cancer in his spine.
Yeah, he had to quit. That's the reason he.
And that's
quit.
why he couldn't go on the road
He had to go
anymore.
home and get fixed. Yeah,
And his
and
cancer
they played a special a gig for him at the what was the name of that theater? Oh God, they're in Jacksonville.
at the Florida Theater or whatever.
In Jacksonville, I don't remember the name of. They had a benefit for Gary Smalley there at that theater.
I know they did a hospice gig for Randall's parent too, you know, and band would they'd show up when they needed to, you know, they did the right thing all the time. But Gary was a super good guy, and I always had a great time with him. We related many different ways to each other, you know.
Well, what was it that pissed you off about it? Was it just that it made it sound like your guitar wasn't in tune, or
I don't care about that.
What was it?
You go halfway around the world to play for an audience and you act like an asshole. I mean, it's like, guys, where's your head at?
It's that whiskey talking.
Yeah,
that whiskey and cocaine that made things seem this way.
No, in Japan, there's no pot. Okay, like zero pot,
unless Craig smuggles it in a speaker.
Mikey remembers that song. It's the whiskey and the cocaine that makes things seem this way. Yeah, they never did finish that song. Yeah,
but
everything still remains the same.
Yeah, in Japan, all they had was liquor. You know, they didn't have any blow or any pot or any, you know, no pills, no nothing. All they had was alcohol. You know, so and I just thought it wasn't right to go halfway around the world and just try to act like a jerk. You know, when I was with the Confederate Railroad, we were playing in Brazil, and we had a pedal steel guitar player. And so when you go to like Brazil, you rent all the gear, but you still have to take your guitars and your junk. And I had to drag this 75-pound pedal steel guitar through an airport, you know, to go play in Brazil, somewhere down in Brazil. And the sound guy called me up on the radio and he said, "Hey man, the steel player's not playing. What's wrong with him?" And I go out on the stage and I go, "Hey man, what's wrong?" He goes, "I just don't feel like it." And I went off the stage, and about 2 songs later, the sound guy goes, "Hey man, will you tell him to start playing?" Because he was just sitting there just noodling. He wasn't really playing. And I finally went out on the stage. I said, "Hey motherfucker, I had to drag this thing through an airport, you know, and had to bring it down to Brazil and set it up. And we're down here playing. And if I got to drag this thing all over the world, you're going to play it." You know, and it kind of woke him up. He kind of woke up and said, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry, man." And he started playing. But I don't know, sometimes people get into a funk or they drink or something like that. But you have to set up, you know, right in the middle of the stage, you have to kind of play a role. And I'm like, I'm not going to drag his shit around the world if you're not going to play it. You know, it's a waste of time for me. But, you know, I guess it was the same for Gary, you know, with the Skynyrds. They, you know, in Europe, I guess they got drunk and acted fool, and he felt the same way I did. I got to walk away from this thing for a couple of hours before I punch somebody in the face.
What about the audience? What did they feel about it?
A lot of times they don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
I mean, they're into the music and stuff. They think it's part of the show when the band acts. I told you about the fight in Paris, you know, and you know, and the stagehands are like, "Does this happen every show?" You know, and you go, "Yeah, man, this is a normal show." The band's fist fighting on the stage, and it kind of was here and there.
Back with a 38 special, did you work with Larry Junstrom much?
I sure did. Larry was a great guy, man.
Yeah, because we don't talk a whole lot about Larry Junstrom. Maybe we can get a Larry Junstrom story out of you.
You know, he's a Jacksonville guy. He played in Lynyrd Skynyrd originally. Larry's tall. You know, he's like 6'3", 6'4", or something like that. But in 38 Special, Larry played the bass, of course, and he would stand there and play with Jack Grondin was playing the drums at the time. But Larry, you didn't mess with Larry on stage because Larry concentrated on what he was doing, and he stood next to the drummer, and he was watching the drummer's right foot, you know, which a bass player should be doing, is being in touch with the drummer's foot. you don't want to be clashing, like you don't want to sound like elephants stumbling around on stage, And everybody in the band was like, you don't mess with Larry during the show because he's taking care of business. He's the foundation. And but off stage, I went to the 24 Hours of Daytona with him because we were race car enthusiasts, and we drove down together and watched the 24. And he was a good guy. He liked to get on his ham radio and talk to people around the world. Back when ham radio, I guess it's still going on. And really good bass player. And we used the PV gear. He used a PV bass and PV amplifiers and stuff. But like I said, 38 Special, let it be known, don't mess with Larry. No jokes, no fooling around. Don't go.
He was a serious type guy then.
He was paying attention to what he was doing, and if Larry flubbed a note, something was wrong because Larry did not make mistakes. He was on every single note of every single gig. He was on the case. Where the Skinners play that way too now. Every note, every time, perfect. But sometimes Leon would trip and fall down, or people bump into stuff, or there'd be extraneous things going on, like stumbling around drunkenness. But Larry was a good guy, and I really like Larry a lot.
Did Larry ever talk to you about, like, okay, you rode down to the races with him? Did he ever go into any topics around original Lynyrd Skynyrd? Did he tell you anything about them or what it was like?
Yeah, nothing special, but we would talk about Bob Burns and Bob's problems. Bob had family problems besides his mental problems, and then his family moved away and he stayed, or then he had to leave, and then he came back without his family. And on Facebook and YouTube, I love to listen to Bob's stories.
Oh, yeah. When he tells a story about how Lynyrd Skynyrd got the name, and he was talking about, Hello Mother, Hello Father, that song. And, and then somebody knocks on the door. There's nobody there. Who was it? It's Lynyrd Skynyrd. Somebody calls on the phone and nobody's on there. Who was it? It's Lynyrd Skynyrd. What do we name the band? Lynyrd Skynyrd. No, we're trying to name the band here, Bob. That's the name,
Alan was telling me that when they would rehearse, I don't know if you all ever been in a band, but when you're rehearsing, it's really loud sometimes, like in the practice room. And sometimes you'll be playing and all of a sudden somebody will say, stop, the phone's ringing. In the middle of all this noise, you'll hear the phone ringing, but the phone, it wasn't ringing. You're just hearing a ringing in your head,
Yeah.
from the loudness of the noise and stuff.
Right.
And Alan said, oh, that's Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yeah,
and I think that Bob Burns rubbed off on Alan as far as that when you hear the phone ringing and you stop the song and the phone's not ringing, well, that's Lynyrd Skynyrd. But I've had that happen to me when I was playing in bands. You just playing along and you hear a phone ringing, but it's really all the loudness all combining into different things. But Bob Burns' stories are always very interesting, and Larry would talk about Bob probably more than
did those two guys pretty good friends, Larry and Bob? Is that probably his favorite? Yeah,
I think so.
Did he mention to you any reason why he left Lynyrd Skynyrd, or do you
probably
know?
Money?
He had to. Skynyrd wasn't making no money. He had to go make money. Yeah,
people were getting real jobs.
So what did he do when he left Skynyrd? Where did he go now? He didn't go?
I'm not sure.
He went back to work somewhere, right, Craig?
Probably.
All I heard is he said he had to go make money. They weren't making it. Well, that was before I got with the band. When I got with the band, they were making $5 a day, and that's when they were on tour.
Yeah,
and that was per diem.
Oh, that's why Leon left, because he had to go work at the ice cream place because he wasn't making any money either. So
yeah,
and his parents told him go get a real job.
Right there where I might have said this before, right there where the Farm Fresh ice cream factory is, they've kind of redid the area a little bit there. And there was a pizza place. I used to go over there and eat pizza. And I think I took Leon over there one time, and we were sitting out on the dock. And in Jacksonville, you know, you can eat and look out on the cove that goes into the river, and it's so scenic and beautiful, you know, just incredible views. And it's just a pizza place right here. But Leon says, yeah, right over here. He pointed to the little cove where the road goes over the tributary there. He goes, yeah, when the band came and got me from the Farm Fresh, we sat right there. And they talked me into getting back in the band because they used to fish right there. But, you know, it's kind of fun sitting there eating pizza and having Leon tell me this is where the band talked me into getting back in the band.
Crazy. Yeah.
But like I said, in Jacksonville, we could go, Craig and I could drive around and every corner point to some stupid thing about, you know, Skynyrd or one of the guys or a car wreck or, you know, this dumb girlfriend or, you know, whatever. But like I said, about talking about Larry, you know, he was a good guy, man, and soft-spoken, and he didn't play dumb, but he wasn't dumb, you know, he was on the ball. But when he played the bass guitar, he was like perfect. He did not make mistakes, you know, never.
What did he have several different basses that he played? What was his favorite?
I think at that time we were just using PV basses.
Yeah.
That you could take on the road and play in the rain and play in the mud and the humidity. You didn't have to worry about hurting your good instruments, you know, because when you're playing a lot of fairs, festivals, you know, you don't.
Compared to Leon, how did he sound compared to, were they pretty much alike? I mean, you know,
no, totally different.
Totally different. Yeah.
Totally different. You know, Leon, Larry was right on it. Larry was right on everything all the time, right on it. Where Leon could be almost an impressionistic, almost kind of bass player. You know, when you're playing I Know a Little, he wasn't going he was going he was sliding into things he was doing with a feel, where Larry was more, he was right, but he was right on top of it, you know, where Leon, you know, Leon was a lot more feel.
Did Leon, because I always heard that nobody ever said anything to Leon at practice about, he just already knew what to do. It's all like he improvised everything, you know. Did you see it like that?
He got to play what he wanted to play, and he played the right thing every time. You know, he knew what he musically intuitive to what fit the song. You know, he didn't have it.
And when you were around in practice, like say even with Rossington Collins and then the tribute band. How did those guys all get along pretty good while they were practicing and everything, or is there ever?
Oh, they worked hard. They worked hard at it.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about practice is they're learning new songs so they can change. So they don't want to be completely locked in, but they got to be playing the same thing every time. But even when you take a break and they come and sit on the couch or they're sitting there smoking a cigarette or something, you really don't hardly talk to them, even though we joked around a lot. Because what'll happen is they're running through a song in their head and you don't know it because they're just sitting there. You don't realize they're continually running these songs through their head. Yeah. And a song isn't like just a little part. A song is a whole long part. And when you're here, you got to be sure and do this. When you get here, you got to do this. So you run it from start to finish, start to finish, start to finish, start to finish. But they worked hard at what they were doing. And
you know, as a guitar player, as yourself, you know, sometimes you'll sit down and you'll go to play a song and you'll go, damn, you forgot it. You know, it's like you forgot the damn chords, you know, and it takes you a little while. Did those guys ever do that? They say, did Gary go, damn, man, I forgot how to do that? And then everybody's waiting on him or anything like that?
Never.
No,
their stuff, they knew their stuff start to finish.
Well, I mean, like new stuff that they were writing or stuff like that, you know?
No, they never talked to each other like that. It was, they were working on things, you know. It's like, hey, I got this song, and Alan would be playing the chords and people would jump on it. And within, 20 minutes, everybody's on page with what's going on. And they might go, hey, how about let's put an extra chorus here, or let's you know, let's get an intro for this thing or something like that. But no, they just worked hard at it.
And see, I can ask Craig these same kinds of questions. Craig doesn't have the patience like you do. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to have a guy like, people want to know,
Well,
like how did they get along while they were practicing? How long did they practice?
I'm not a musician, so I don't know these kind of things.
Well,
yeah, but you listen though.
Well, but it's a little different.
Craig, he just don't. Yeah, he just don't. I mean, some stuff, Craig. He'll remember.
It's like
stuff.
somebody building an engine. If you know how to build an engine and watch somebody, you have a different aspect than somebody just standing there watching somebody build an engine.
But sometimes they'll be doing a new song, and Billy will go off on one that's real fast. And you want to say, Billy, why don't you play it like Tuesday's Gone? Ding, 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 instead of every time he want to get into this, how fast can I go kind of thing. But they would calm that, he'd back off on that. But sometimes I felt, this is me, the songs were way overproduced. In other words, does everybody have to have a lead break? Does there have to be a piano break in every song? That's just me. And they would have a big thing where they could have cut it down and made it more concise. But that's my opinion, okay?
But don't you think they would look at Leon and go, hey, I'm not going to try to tell Leon how to write a bass part to that because Leon's a great bass player. No, Billy, I'm not going to try to tell Billy how to write a piano part there.
That's right.
I'm going to let him do it himself, just like I wouldn't want him to tell me how to do my guitar part. I want to think on my own.
But for Leon, they might tell him the notes. They might go, we're in key of G here, G here. Okay, but when we go here, we're going to E minor, then we're going to go C sharp minor, and then we're going to go back to G. And he'll go, okay, yeah. Just little things like that. But that's
the kind of stuff I don't know.
Did they ever ask you an opinion on anything as far as like, what do you think we ought to do, Mike?
Craig might have been there when we were at the practice house, and they made
Ronnie used to ask opinions on writing lyric, and that's kind of funny. And and I would just laugh and go, I would do this or whatever. And he would just laugh, but he'd just want to hear how what somebody else would say. And then he would do it his own way,
Yeah. They made the acoustic album or something like that. They made an acoustic album and we weren't there. They didn't take roadies to the studio. They went up to Nashville and made this album and they had background singers singing on it. And what's his name produced it? I forget what his name was. Famous producer here in Nashville. But Gary played it for us. And I said, man, I'd rather hear Leon sing in the background. I said, 20 years from now, when I hear this, I want to hear Leon. I don't want to hear some Nashville 2 girls and a guy singing the background vocals. And then they did another song, and they did Saturday Night Special. And they played everything except the Saturday Night Special riff. They played what would be other riffs that would fit in with it, but they didn't play the actual riff, And I said, you didn't play the main riff, And after about 3 or 4 songs, Gary's like, fuck you guys. If you don't like it, you're just criticizing everything. And I said, well, don't ask me if you don't want to hear what I have to say. But I don't think that album did very much.
Well, like at practice, was there anybody that kind of led the practice? Like, okay, for example, Rossington Collins, or anybody that was like the band leader? They kind of like, okay, let's do this now. Or is there anybody that was like more in charge?
I would say Alan, in my opinion, or Gary too, but mostly Alan, I think.
Alan and Gary.
Yeah, so Alan and Gary both kind of took charge of what was going to be played and how,
Gary probably more than Alan to me, even though he was kind of quiet about it, Alan said it right out loud, and Gary would say we ought to do this kind of thing. This is the way I see it. But yeah, those two guys kind of ran it like that. Unless Mr. Drummer felt like he had to work on something or whatever. Since the drummer counted off all the songs, you know.
So Craig, when you were over at Alan and Gary's, I forget whose house it was, Gary's house or Alan's house, and they got in the argument and they went outside.
It
They
was
got in a
Alan's,
fist fight.
yeah.
Was it Alan's? And they got in a fist fight, and then they broke up. What happened? What happened? How did you find out about it there?
I was there.
No, I'm talking about.
Oh.
I'm talking about Mikey. How did you
The
find out?
night Alan and Gary got in the fist fight, and then Gary left. When Gary and Dale left,
Because that was the end of your job right there. That was it. You were done.
Yeah, I think I heard about it the next day. Said that Gary quit and him and Dale were leaving town or something like that. And I was thinking, man, I got to go over to Gary's and see what's going on. But I didn't.
well, they were gone. But I went over to Alan's, and Alan said, "What are you doing here? You're Gary's buddy." I go, "Well, Gary's gone. I need another buddy." But you hung around, and we started the Alan Collins band.
Yeah, I used to hang with,
It went right into Alan Collins' band, right out.
Yeah,
right
pretty
into
much
that?
right away.
Oh, there wasn't
yeah.
any time in between.
yeah,
Pretty much.
I kind of hung with Alan during the Rosslyn Collins, and Craig was hanging with Gary.
Yeah, I was Gary's
Kind of, but
buddy.
it wasn't written in stone, you know. But I could hold my own with Alan because I was a little taller, you know, not tall as him, but you know, I could take his abuse really good. But no, we'd run around and do whatever had to be done. But yeah, as soon as Gary and them left, it's like, hey, I'm gonna put my own band together, and we didn't miss a beat.
But what happened like with the pay and everything? Was there had to be like
no pay.
Yeah, so you just like, oh shit, we're not getting paid now, so we're just going to have to go into something else until we do. Is that, the philosophy that you had, or?
The philosophy was get the band together and go make some money right now, like tomorrow.
Yeah. So
we were hanging around. Craig was living in a storage unit half the time.
I was married, and me and my marriage didn't get along, so I went and rented a storage unit. When I was fighting with my wife, I had a double storage unit, and I just pulled my car in one side and closed the door, and I had all my stuff in the other side. It was real close to Billy, Billy's house.
And I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and I think I was married at the time, and thank goodness I didn't have any bills other than paying the rent and trying to get some food.
Craig said it was crazy off the chain with Alan. He said it was like the worst time.
He was addicted to those Delados, man.
And it got worse and worse and worse until, I said before, I had to get away from him. I thought he was going to kill me. I mean, I thought I was going to get shot or something.
He pulled guns on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the story you hear from everybody. It's like he's always shooting the gun, the rifle, and he's just
and this is
the BB gun. Did he hit you with the BB gun before or anything? Because he used to shoot that quite often.
I don't never remember me actually getting shot with it. I know he shot at a lot of people running for that door at rehearsal. He'd have that gun hidden, and then we'd take a break, and he'd go grab that gun, and man, everybody'd run for the door trying to get out. I don't remember ever getting shot, though.
Sally Arnold said that's why she left, because he just missed Craig by about a foot, and Craig went, "Oh, it wasn't a foot; it was a couple feet." A couple feet, that's close enough. Yeah, it wasn't that close. It was only a couple feet.
And the gun stuff, that was at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. That wasn't the middle of the day. That was after partying hardy into the night after the bars are closed and the drunks were around. And it was.
Were you there for Todd's wedding? when Todd
Yeah.
married Pam, and
Yeah.
we had the party, and all those straight people were there, and he pulled the gun off the wall and opened the door and shot it, and all those people left. He goes, "I knew that would work." He said, "Now we can party."
Yeah.
Oh,
I remember that.
that's when we all ate that purple microdot. Oh my God. We'd be tripping.
Yeah, that wedding was pretty crazy, I'm gonna tell you. Pretty crazy.
Well, you know, there's so many stories I've heard, especially around Steve Reynolds. You know, telling me, you know, because he was around him at his worst, and you know, some of the stuff he was just that guy. Alan was just on a mission.
He was around him at his
Self-destruct
worst.
mission.
I even left it before that, man. He was,
So when did you take off, Mikey? When, you know, just like, did you have enough of it or what?
we took off about the same time, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I think Craig
After Alan Collins, after he walked off stage at the Lone Star, me and Mikey were driving the truck. It was just me and Mikey. He was running the stage, and I was putting the stage together, and we were driving the truck, and I was running the out front sound, and he was running the stage. It was just us two. And we did that New York City gig, and Alan walked off stage, and we drove home, and I think both of us said, "Man, this is it. You know, we're done."
Yeah, it was so depressing to drive into Jacksonville, you know, the truck full of gear and going over to Jacob Street, backing up and unloading the gear at, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, that's not the greatest part of town anyway. And it's like, gosh, we come back to this, you know, and have to take the truck back, you know, and go home with no money because when we left, I think Craig gave me my per diem for the whole trip, and I had to give it to my wife for rent. So, you know, the first day of the tour, I go out with zero money in my pocket, knowing that I could find some food somewhere, you know. And,
So compared to Rossington Collins, the Alan Collins income was not as good.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you came back and you went out with the tribute band, and that was all nice and polished, and you got a pretty good check then, right? I mean, that was pretty.
Yeah, we
organized.
got paid. We got paid for that, but you only got paid for when you worked. If we were going out for 6 weeks, you got paid for 6 weeks, and then if we took 2 months off, you didn't get paid. Then you got paid for another.
Well, we
8
all went.
weeks.
When did you? I was on salary. We all went on salary there.
I wasn't on
Well,
salary.
No,
I
we all
got
went on salary.
$1,000 a week. Yeah, it was $1,000 a week, but we were playing 9 shows in a row and 1 day off, and 11 shows in a row and 1 day off. It was
What did you do when you weren't touring then? What were you doing?
sitting on my dumb ass.
So you
No, I go work as a stagehand, and
okay.
you can't make a lot of money being a stagehand.
Oh, me and Mikey drove down to. We were living in Jacksonville. We drive to Orlando and Miami to not Miami, but Orlando, and do shows as stagehands.
We
Yeah,
did Ted Nugent, Bad Company.
yeah.
We did all kinds of goofy Cinderella.
David Lee Roth, I think we did too.
Yeah, we did. With Steve I was playing guitar for him.
Yeah.
We got in the car after the gig and drive over to a gas station. They put gas in the car, and both of us can't get out of the car because we're so wore out from.
Well,
driving.
since we drove so far, they gave us a show call and everything. So it was.
So we worked
were making
all
pretty
day.
good money to drive down there. You know.
But you start at 8 in the morning, and you get done at 2 in the morning. You know, you work.
Yeah, and then
20
we
hours
have to
a day.
drive for 3 hours.
But we pull in to get gas, and we can't hardly get out of the car and stagger over to put gas in the car. But
During
yeah,
all of that touring and all of that stuff, Mikey, who like in other bands that would you say that some of the famous people that you met and some of the stories of being around some of the other musicians like that were on tour? You got any stories like that?
well, Hank Williams Jr., I never talked to him. You know, I was his guitar roadie in a Japanese tour, and I'd walk out. They had a roadie called Jaybird, I think his name was, And he told me what the deal was, what the show was going to be. No set list. He's going to use his electric guitar for 2 songs. You take his fiddle out to him. He's going to throw his fiddle to you, and he's not going to look at you,
Damn.
And then he's going to walk around and play all the instruments. They do a song where he plays the pedal steel, he plays the drums, he plays the piano, he does everything.
Really?
And then you take his acoustic guitar out to him, and he sits down on a chair and sings Hank Williams songs, which is way cool. Then he stands up and holds his guitar, and you give him his electric guitar, and he plays 2 songs. Then you give him his fiddle again, and he throws his fiddle to you. Then you take his electric guitar out there, and then the show's over. And that was kind of a Hank thing. But I never met him before the shows, and we did about 14 shows or something. So he'd come on from one side of the stage, and I'd come on the other side of the stage, and I'd give him his guitar, and he'd kind of look at me, and he'd go, "Thanks." And I'd walk off stage. Then he'd go take his jacket off. So I'd walk out there and take his jacket, and he'd look at me and he goes, "Thanks." And I put his jacket over here. Then he'd take his guitar off, and I'd give him his fiddle, and he said, so he said, "Thank you," every single time I did something to him. And he would play the fiddle, and after the song was over, he wouldn't look at you. He would just throw it over his head, and he knew somebody was going to catch it,
So you never had a
Somebody.
conversation with him, huh?
Never had a conversation.
Did you ever screw up at all? Like,
No. And I asked the crew, I said, "Well, how does he want his electric guitar to sound?" They go, "He wants it to sound like a loud ass electric guitar." And I said, "I can do that, And then I took his acoustic guitar out there for sound check. And I go, "How does he like his acoustic guitar to sound?" They go, he wants it loud so he can hear it. And I said, "No problem."
It sounds like Pops. Like Pops said when he first came to work for Skynyrd, nobody told him anything. He said he's like they kept coming over and lining up cocaine and handing him joints and stuff, but they wouldn't tell him what to do. And so he'd be like, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" "Well, you're supposed to be the expert. You know what to do." Is that the kind of feeling you got?
Yeah, but with the Skinners, that was a test, okay? They'll offer you whiskey and they'll offer you cocaine and smoke some marijuana.
Oh.
If you want to go get too fucked up to do your job, you go right ahead, is what they were saying. But if you're smart,
so that
you would
makes
do your
sense,
job.
Craig.
And they'd go, "Okay, we can trust this guy, with our junk, with our taking care of us." Because when a band's on stage, they don't look at you. They're looking at the audience, and that's their job. And you stand there. I always try to stand there with a smile on my face, like, best gig ever. Boy, this sounds so great. I never heard it so good before. This is the greatest in the whole wide world, And they knew it was a big fake smile, but, that's what the nature of the game is. But I'll tell you what, if Gary Rossington turned around and looked at me, I'm over to his amp to see what the heck's going on. Like he heard something or he saw something, Or if Leon turns to look at me, I'm like, I'm on the case. What's going on? But if everything's going fine, they don't pay attention to you. They're looking straight out at the audience, which is a cool thing. But once again, with Hank, so we play the last show, and he walks off the stage, and I take his guitar over to the side over here, and I go, "Okay, all the show's over with. Everything's cool. I made my money. I stayed at 5-star hotels. I got treated like the prince. I had a day off every day before a show, day off after the show. It was really cool, It was real easy schedule and everything. And the promoter goes out there and he's going, "Mr. Hank Williams Jr. from USA, Hank Williams Jr." And the crowd's kind of cheering and clapping and stuff. And Hank came out and did an encore. I gave him his electric guitar. They rocked out, encore, and went out and got his guitar, and he walked off the stage. And a guy named Johnny Roberts was doing monitors. And Craig, you might know Johnny Roberts. He might have done Skynyrd monitors at one time.
I remember the name.
He's from Atlanta, and he talks like this. He's like, anyway, Johnny Roberts. He's a really good guy. And I was cleaning up the stage and getting the cables and shit. And he goes, "Man, I don't believe it." And I go, "What's going on?" He goes, "I've been with Hank for 15 years, and he's never played an encore. So when I was his roadie, he played an encore, So I got to be there when Hank Jr. played an encore in Japan. But Johnny,
he must have been in a good mood or something.
He loved the way the Japanese treated him, I guess, and the promoter and everybody.
But he was notorious for canceling shows. Did you? I mean, what happened? Did you get an extra day off on that, or what? I mean,
He didn't
did you
cancel any
see?
shows. He played all the shows.
Oh, you didn't see that? You
This
never
was
saw
just
that?
we played up in New Jersey at a big football stadium or something, and Hank opened for us, or we opened for Hank. I forget what it was, because Skynyrd would open for Hank sometimes, and his production manager was the same guy who did 38 Special, Jeff Jackson. He's from Atlanta, red hair guy, really nice guy. Except when he got excited, his voice would come in. But and his feet always hurt. Jeff Jackson, love that guy. But he goes, "Hey, we need a guitar roadie to go to Japan with Hank." So I went and got on an airplane and flew to LA, and that's where I met the band. Was on the airplane flight to Japan, and who's that Nixon guy, Craig? That Nixon.
John Nixon.
John Nixon was the production manager for Hank Jr. and Jeff Jackson was the stage manager when I went to Japan with Hank.
Was that the first time you went with? Is that how you got introduced to working with Hank? Then, right?
Yeah.
Then? Okay.
And so we did Japan for a couple of weeks. It was great. It was really, really great. But he did an encore, you know. So that's one little story about Hank Jr. Confederate Railroad, the singer Danny Shirley is just the greatest guy in the world. And his band used to be who's the biker guy that has the filthy songs? David Allan Coe.
Oh yeah.
You know, he's got really filthy songs.
Yeah,
I mean,
Mike Owings used to play in his band.
Yeah, well, Danny Shirley and the Confederate Railroad used to be his band, his backing band.
Oh, okay.
At different times. So we would go play bike festivals, and we'd play the hardcore bike festivals, like Easy Rider Magazine is not a yuppie magazine. It's for hardcore bikers, you know. Or we played the Outlaw Clubhouse in Jacksonville, Florida, or we played the Hells Angels Clubhouse in Detroit. You know, we played like the real bikers, the real scuzzy bikers, pagans and show up and all that. And pagans. Anyway, we're not talking about bikers, but anyway,
put a hit on you.
With Danny Shirley and the Confederate Railroad, we would play these bikers, and he would do the David Allan Coe songs, and they use the N word in their filthy songs, you know, and and the bikers loved them, you know. But the Confederate Railroad, their love songs were to families. Their love songs was to mother and dad. Their songs about girls, they make fun of girls. She gets drunk and walks like a duck, or she took it like a man, or she never cried when Old Yeller died. You know, they make fun of the women songs. They didn't do sappy love songs. Their sappy love songs were Jesus and Mama always loved me when the devil took control, or Daddy never was the Cadillac kind. They're talking about him in a funeral in the back of a Cadillac.
It's kind of like David Allan Coe songs, though, but probably
but we'd play those clubhouses and they do the filthiest songs. Then the next day we'd go play a county fair, you know. And Danny Shirley, who's the leader of the band, has kids, you know. And we do we're going to do the milk and cookie show.
Yeah.
And he would do the milk and cookies because grandma and the kids and the fair queen and all those people were in the front, you know, and he could switch on a dime, you know. And so he was, and that band did not use the set list, the Confederate Railroad. Whatever Danny did is what the band did. He didn't like his band getting complacent. You know, if they knew what the set list was, they'd just walk through it, you know. He made them stay on their toes. He might start off with any song in the world, or in the middle of the show, you know, we'd be in 110 degrees in Sykeston, Oklahoma at a rodeo, and he'd play Blue Christmas right in the middle of the show, you know, just to cool things down. Or, you know, Danny was a good guy, man. And he would play the right thing at the right time for everybody. And then I'm just going to say Hank the Third, you know, Hank Williams the Third.
Yeah, I heard he's pretty damn good.
He's a good guy, and I like Hank the Third. But he opened for us a couple of times, and we'd be at these county fairs with grandma and the kids and the stuff. And he'd go out and let's go put the dick in Dixie and put the cunt in country. And
really?
yeah, and you go, hey man, look at your crowd. What would you do? He was young and wanted to be a punk rocker. I think he grew up from doing that kind of bullshit. But and Lone Star was good guys. They had a lot of hits. We did a lot of shows for President Bush because they were from Texas. He was the president from Texas, and whenever he needed a band, he'd call them up to come and be the band because he supported Texas.
Oh, really? What kind of songs did they play? Just like country songs?
They had a bunch of hits. They had "Baby I'm Amazed" was a crossover hit, so they had a huge.
Oh, that's right. I remember that song.
Yeah, and they had a song. My favorite song was called "Oh Daggone, I can't think." "I'm Already There," and what happened was the American Red Cross used that song to unite families with soldiers when they were coming back, from the Iraq War, Afghanistan. So whenever Bush would do something and they needed a couple songs, the Lone Star would show up and play a couple songs. And we played one time at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. That's where Lincoln was shot.
Yeah.
And it was called the Gala Event at Ford Theater. And that's where they raised money for Ford Theater. And it was Lone Star and a comedian from Texas and a TV actor from Texas, and Tom Scott Band was his house band. It's a 2-hour show, and Alison Krauss was there, and in the show, everybody in the audience was a congressman or a senator. Every single person was wearing a tuxedo, and the show started with the president and his wife walking down the aisle and sitting in the front row. And it was televised on ABC, but and we did camera blocking the day before, but the band would do, "I'm already there, take a look around, I'm the sunshine in your hair, I'm the shadow on the ground, I'm the whisper in the wind, when you need a friend, I'm already there." And it's about soldiers and their families. But they would show the president, and Richie McDonald was the singer, and he sang so good, man. He's a super good Christian kind of guy and a great singer. But that was an interesting gig. And then the president was going to play for 50,000 Marines at Camp Lejeune. I don't know if you remember this, but it was going to be on CNN, 50,000 Marines. The president was going to make a speech, and he wanted Lone Star to play to entertain the Marines before he got there. So we get there in our bus, and it's not a stage, it's a presidential podium, It's like, and there's Marines behind us, Marines beside us. They built a special bleacher, 50,000 Marines. So I go up on where the band's going to play, and I got the guitars and the fiddle and shit. So I just hand it to these Marines. I go, "Here, hold this for me." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, man. Hold this guitar. Hold this bass for me. Hold this fiddle for me." It was kind of, "Hold these drumsticks and this snare drum for me." So I got these Marines in a row standing there holding all my instruments because I didn't want to get out the guitar stands, and there was no room for all that. And the band gets up there and plays like 2, 3, 4 songs, and CNN's televising it live. And then here comes the helicopter with the president, and he lands. The band gets off the podium, goes down there, and he's buddies with him. They've done about 10 shows for him. So they go over, "Hey, Mr. President, how you doing?" Blah, blah. And he gets up and does his speech. But it was cool doing shows like that with Lone Star, actually. And
yeah, you almost have like a secret clearance for that stuff, because I've been around, the president's party before, and they check you out, man.
Yeah, they get the dogs out, and they make everybody leave, and they do a bomb check. Or the Ford Theater, I went out the back door, the stage door, just to go out back and get some air, with the dumpster. And the guys are on the roofs with their guns, military guys, Secret Service guys and stuff.
Yeah, I've been around those Secret Service guys.
But I'll tell you what, this might kind of be a long story, but this is Lone Star, country band from Texas, and really good guys. And we would do radio shows. I did them with Skinner too. We're just 4 guys, just Ed, Gary, and Ed and Gary and Johnny, and I forget who the 4th one was, maybe Randall. And we just do radio shows, do 2 or 3 a day for a week, then go sign at record stores after we did the radio thing. But I was doing that with Lone Star, and their record company gave us a private jet. And I traveled with the 4 main guys in Lone Star, And we were doing radio shows, and we were supposed to do one down at Fort Hood, Texas, at the Army base. Well, the airplane broke. We were taking off, and they had to abort the takeoff. And then after that, we had to wait and get the airplane fixed, and we missed that show. So we were on tour a couple of weeks later. We're going through Texas, and they go, "Hey, let's stop at Fort Hood and do a makeup show for the Army guys." So we stop at their PX. That's their post exchange. It's as big as 2 super Walmarts, maybe bigger. This is the hugest super Walmart I ever saw in my life. Okay. And out in front in the parking lot, they made a stage, and it was, it was like 3 feet high, and it was only 16 by 16. It was a really rickety stage, and there was no lights because it was in the afternoon, and it was the local hippie, one guy with a big long ponytail, set up his sound system with a million wires going everywhere. It was a real piece of junk gig. So I get up there and I get the guitars ready. It's going to be an acoustic show. And the Lone Star guys come out wearing sunglasses, and the sun's beating down on us. There's no thing, middle of Texas. And they start playing. And during all of it, I wasn't paying attention, But then I turn around and I realized there's only 4 MPs in front of the stage. There's no security, no anything. Okay, we're in a parking lot. 2 MPs on either side of the stage. And there's about 20 kids playing right in front of the stage. Just kids, just playing. It's like, this is cool. And I look at the crowd, and it was a big crowd. It's like 5,000 or 6,000 people. And the more I looked, I go, hey, look, there's no dudes. All the dudes were off at war. It was all women. The whole crowd was nothing but women and little kids running around. And there was no security, so that they kind of filtered around all the way around the stage, And Lone Star's up there playing their Lone Star, "Baby, I'm amazed by you," And they played that song, "I'm Already There." And this song's like 2 minutes and 5 seconds. It's a little song. And they're playing it. He called her from the road, from a lonely hotel room, to tell her he loved her one more time. And he heard the kids in the background going, "Daddy, when you come on," It's a tearjerker for a family, And he's singing a song, and I look up, and the crowd is crying. And I'm talking about like seriously crying. Every single woman has got tears down their face, and their faces are scrunched up, scrunch up their face when they're trying not to cry. Cry. Everybody's crying. And the kids stop playing, and they turn around and look like, what's wrong? Should I be crying too, And they get done with the song, I'm already there, strum. And then they cheer, okay? It's great, they cheer. And Richie, the singer, Richie McDonald, he goes, "Hey, we're going to do a couple more songs." He goes, "But to tell you the truth, I just can't sing right now." He goes, "I just can't sing." And he said, "Has anybody got a Kleenex?" And I swear about 2,000 Kleenexes popped up in the air from the crowd. They all had their purses out, getting their Kleenexes out, and they're all waving their Kleenexes. And I'm talking about thousands, not just a couple hundred, like thousands. And he jumps off the stage and runs straight into the crowd, and starts collecting Kleenexes.
So he was serious, huh?
Yeah, and he gets back on stage with a great big handful of Kleenexes and wipes his face off. He goes, "Okay, let's go on, let's play." And they continue to play. But of all this tribute tour, all the tributes to this, all the 9/11 shows we did, all the stuff,
yeah, I bet
that was really the most emotional show. And it was just a piece of junk stage with a piece of crap PA with no lights out in a parking lot in Texas, and that's the kind of things, the gigs that Craig and I do, it's not always the biggest, hugest tribute, blah, blah, blah. Everybody looking at the hat. I'm just saying that. But it's other gigs that really you remember every single bit about it from the whole day. Because you have those big, huge tribute gigs, and you do so many of them in a row, you don't remember them. You don't even remember them.
Yeah, that was something that, just was unexpected.
But anyway, you asked me about the other gigs I worked for. But when I delivered equipment here in Nashville, I was a cartage guy, which meant I delivered the studio musicians to the studios. But I have pushed the door open and almost knock Willie Nelson down. You come in, you push the door open and bring the gear in, and I didn't know Willie Nelson was standing there, and I about ran over. And his little crew guy, he's got 2 or 3 cowboys with him. They're ready to kick my ass because I just about knocked Willie over. Or Reggie Davis. You don't know who Reggie Davis is, but he played with Elvis as a guitar player. I did Cardi.
Yeah, I heard of him. Yeah,
and he played on so many of these iconic songs. And a lot of studio cats and a lot of guys in studios. I had Garth Brooks come out and help me unload the truck for his guitar player and steel player. Garth Brooks would come and help. He can't help it. He's such a nice guy. He wants to come and help you, or, I've talked to Taylor Swift when she was doing her first tour, and there was no doubt on the stage, she was in charge, and she was 18 years old.
Yeah, she was just a kid.
And she wasn't bossing anybody around, but she was like, hey, guitar player, blah, 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 blah. Hey, this and that. We're going to do this song. We're going to change the story. Hey, Mr. Soundman, we're doing this. She knew every single aspect of what was going on. And then you talk to her, and she's just this little teenage girl who's personable as ever. And just people like that I've run into in a professional context. And when you run into them like that, it's like it's work related. So there's no I'm a fan kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. I know. You can't act like that around them anyway because, they sense it. Because I've been around like a lot of these Hollywood movie stars and, and they'll have you removed if you even think about, coming up there and bugging them. Mm-hmm. And like you were saying, when you were talking about how Gary and Alan, they'd be quiet, but they're over there trying to think about what they're playing and stuff. And a lot of times those people, those actors, they're trying to remember their lines. And I went over and it was Shia LaBeouf, and I was working on that movie out at the Space Center, and Shia LaBeouf, and I'd already been talking to him. I didn't really know who he was. And I went up to him at the lunch thing, and they ran over there and screamed at me, "Get away from him!" And then later on, he came up to me, he goes, "Hey, man," he goes, "they do that because I'm supposed to be in character, and right. I gotta keep thinking about my character." And he goes, it wasn't. He says it's a union thing. It's basically a union thing. A lot of that stuff is union stuff,
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do things. The union don't allow it,
Yeah, the musicians, they're running those songs through their head.
Yeah.
And, after a while, you realize what's going on. And you don't run it through your head in 10 seconds. It takes 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is. And they're trying to remember the arrangement, and they're trying to do this. And, every second time I do this, but then we're going to do that, So you kind of learn not to go with the small talk unless people are joking around and having a good old time.
Yeah. Well, we got, I'm going to ask another question here from one of our listeners, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. What do you think, Craig? We were on the Pops thing for like 3 hours, and the time slips by when you're having fun. But I still got to edit this thing. And but Lynn Cumby, she's one of our subscribers, and she's kind of like a fan of the show. And she asked, and this is kind of one of the things either you or Craig, either one could answer, but who would win a drinking contest among Billy, Leon, Alan, and Gary?
Whiskey or Tanqueray?
Well, it'd have to be clear liquor because they didn't allow brown liquor.
I don't know. Billy kind of drank all day, and Alan could drink pretty good, but Gary could drink good, and Leon was no slouch when it came to drinking.
So they were all pros. I heard Billy, the more he drank, the better he played.
Billy never drank any brown liquor. Hard. He was a vodka drinker.
Yeah.
Leon drank everything, and yeah. Alan was mostly Crown Royal or Jack Daniels, and Gary was mostly brown liquor, I guess. But yeah, Gary.
Would they drink at practice?
I'd say Alan I watched him drink that brown liquor right out of the bottle, and I
So
don't
you think
know.
Alan would be probably the worst?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a tough one.
How about, was there one band member who was always late?
Billy, Leon,
All of them.
all of them. Yeah, all of them.
And then
Yeah.
she asked,
Billy was always late coming to rehearsal, though.
Well, Billy couldn't
But
drive.
he lived the furthest away, but he was always.
what, did he
late
lose his
coming to
license,
rehearsal.
Mike?
Yeah, he didn't have a license. He'd go drive his boat. That was the only thing he could drive. He'd have to get a ride, or you have to go pick him up, or you have to take him home, or something like that.
Yeah, he liked to go out in his boat and watch the airplanes take off at the runway, didn't he, Craig?
Land at the runway. They'd come in about 60 feet over your head.
Did you do that with him before, Mikey?
Yeah, I didn't fish though. Those guys that stay up partying all night long, then go out fishing in the morning. You know, him and Gary and Big Lou or whoever was with him, they'd go out running around.
You go out with them, but you just didn't fish.
Occasionally,
Yeah,
not very often though.
that's pretty cool.
But they all drank their own way, you know. As far as practice, you know, they would drink some beer and stuff at practice. It wasn't let's get screwed up at practice, you know.
It was always usually after the show then, huh, is when they started.
And like the show, they had the rituals before the show. Like I'm going to have a shot before here, and I'm going to take a shot here. Then on stage, they'd have shot. Like when I put whiskey on the stage, I'd put one shot at a time, and then I'd have to go put another shot.
So,
And
so you handled the amenities too, just like Craig.
Well, everybody did, but somebody go, well, why don't you just go fill his glass up so you don't have to go out there? And I said, if I filled it up, he would drink it at one time, and then I had to fill it up again. So you just try to give him a little bit at a time. And they'd have a beer and a shot and smoke a cigarette and have a little Coke there for a chaser. And they kind of knew, you know, I could do a shot, and 3 songs later, I could do another shot. And you know, 3 songs is about 15 minutes. And so they could work it out. They wouldn't just go out and get drunk, you know, and stumble around. But a lot of times they did get drunk and stumble around. But they maintain it. You know, it's like Leon that one time here in Nashville, his stupid Omen 5 showed up, one of his wives, you know. Anyway, his dumbass wife showed up, and he did his regular, well, I'm going to take a drink before the show, and I'll take this drink during the show. Well, she gave him a couple pills, you know, Valium or whatever.
Damn.
And daggone, all of a sudden, we're in Mr. Breeze, and Leon's standing there not playing. And it's like, Leon, what's going on? And he passed out standing up, you know, and we drug him behind the amp line and took a towel with cold water and slapped him in the face. And, you know, and I thought, well, heck, there's only 2 songs left. I could stand behind the amps and play the guitar, you know, because Leon couldn't play. He didn't know what he was doing. And finally, he kind of looked around, and I said, Leon, you're playing Mr. Breeze in the key of A. And he went, oh, okay. And then he stumbled back out. But that's because his ex-wife or whatever, we called his wife's omens. Omen 1, 2, 3, 4, Omen 5, gave him some pills, which interfered with his normal.
Funny you should mention that, because she asks, did Mike Sparks get to meet any of the wives?
Oh yeah, all of them.
Yeah,
I was telling Craig the other day.
Mike lived at the mansion out there in Mandarin.
At Leon's.
Yeah.
You did?
Church. Yeah.
When I first got in town, I lived out there for, you know, who knows?
Is that place I went to, Craig? And I
the mansion, the old church out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was out there videoing.
Yeah,
Mike lived there.
The guy that built that house built a boat out in the woods behind that house. And after he built the boat, he had to cut down the trees to get the boat out to the boatyard. And he got the boat in the water, and I think it fell over. You know, he didn't quite know what he was doing. And when it was a big boat with 2 masts on it and everything. But Leon's house out there. But Leon's wife, Rena or something, I don't know. She got a car, and a house and a trailer and a horse. That was her payoff. And all his wives took his money and stuff away. And Gary had Martha, his first wife, and Martha was kind of like, Gary, you're not a superstar. You're just Gary Rosington, and she would tell us, quit treating him like he's somebody. He's just Gary. And we're like, well, we work for Gary. If he tells us to move a piano, we're going to move the piano. And of course, Kathy, was Alan's wife. And Billy's first wife, Stella, she was a pretty strong personality. She had kids, she was a mother, and they butted heads, but they were good for each other. But then he married Barry Harwood's wife, Martha.
Ellen.
Ellen. Yeah, Ellen had a couple kids, and Ellen's was a sweetheart. It was Billy took care of Billy, and Johnny's wife. I only met her a couple times. At the time, I really didn't talk to her very much. Cuss wasn't married, I don't think. Artemis's wife, I knew her.
Custer's still with that same woman, I believe, and they're still not married.
He's a good guy. He was a wild child.
Yeah, I think he's still with her.
We taught him how to be a Lynyrd Skynyrd, though, didn't
we? He was on the podcast, Custer.
Were you there when he threw the drums in Canada?
Oh, yes. I was
we didn't talk about that with Mikey. Everybody else we've talked about.
I thought we did.
Did we?
Yeah. Well,
I know I talked to Curtsy about it. And then,
at the time, Dallas Shue, who's a guitar roadie for at The Edge on YouTube, Dallas Shue was his name. He was doing the guitars. Clayton, we talked about earlier, Clayton hired him to take care of the guitars, and I was the stage manager. So during the show, I'd go out to the front of house, and I'd go up to the spotlights, and I'd go over to Monitor World. I'd walk around everywhere because I didn't have to stay in Guitar World because Dallas was doing the guitars. Well, I'm at the front of house, and I see Artimus acting fool. He's yelling at Ed, and he's giving Ed the finger, and Ed's giving it back to him. Ed don't take shit off nobody. So I go up to the stage, and Artimus grabs two tambourines, and he's smashing them extra hard together. And the deal was, Ed asked Artimus to quit playing on the new songs because he didn't know the new songs. He knew the old songs.
Oh, see, we didn't hear that.
Kurt played on the new album, 1991 or whatever it was. And Artimus didn't really learn the songs. He was playing along, and his kick pedal was kind of clashing with what was going on with Kurt. And Kurt could play the Lynyrd Skynyrd songs because he laid back and he knew the Lynyrd Skynyrd songs, but Artimus, in my opinion, didn't know the 1991 songs. And Ed said, quit playing, play percussion or fake it or whatever. And Artimus got really pissed off about that. And
did they have Curtsy there to pick up the slack because Artemis's leg? Isn't that what it was? Is that why they had two drummers? No.
Ed met him at a guitar show or at the NAMM show and said, hey, I got this really great drummer, and he's on the case. And so he came, and Tom Dowd was a producer. And Tom Dowd says, yeah, he plays drums pretty good. And Tom Dowd allowed Kurt to play on all the songs. Artimus was there, but he didn't play on anything. Artimus just hung around and went around town. They wouldn't let him play on anything. And he was
that's what was pissing him off.
Yeah, he was real pissed off about that. Then we went on the road, and then Ed said, don't play on the new songs. And they only played like 3 or 4 new songs. But anyway, Artimus was pissed off, and he started playing the drums too hard. He was trying to break his heads, and he was trying to break his cymbals, and he was acting a fool, and he knocked his cymbals over. But he picked up 2 tambourines, and he started playing them so hard that he broke the tambourines. And the little timbre things, they flew over. And the girls were singing right here, and it hit Dale in the face.
Oh shit!
A piece of the tambourine hit Dale in the face, and I forget who, Debbie Bailey or somebody. I don't know who was singing, the other blonde girl. The pieces of the tambourine hit them in the face, and they're standing there rubbing their face, looking at Artimus, and Gary saw it, and Gary said, "Hey, motherfucker!" And Gary does this. He's holding a pick. Okay, he does this when he want to let you know what's going on. And he's pointing at Artimus, goes, motherfucker, I'm going to kick your ass. That's when Artimus knocked his drums over, said, come on, You gonna
Wow.
fight me here? And he
Were
knocked
you
his
seeing the expression of the audience at all?
No, I was standing right behind Artemis because I had already picked up the cymbals and I picked up the drum, and he'd already hit him in the face, and so Ed and Gary were gonna beat Artemis's ass, and Artemis was pushing the drums out of the way so he could jump down there and fight with him or something. Anyway, I'm kind of like standing there and I look around, and Craig, Tim, Big Lou, Paul Abrams, maybe it might have been all of us, 4 or 5 or 6 of us all went out there. And I grabbed him. I said, Artemis, come on, you got to go with us. And excuse my German, but he turned around and he said, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. He said it about 10 times right to my face, this close. And I said, no, man, that ain't working. We got to get off the stage. So we actually grabbed him.
And that was your buddy. That's who got you hired.
Well,
is he still mad at you, Mikey?
He's not mad at me. But when he sees me, he sees Lynyrd Skynyrd, and he's mad at Lynyrd Skynyrd. So
that's same thing with Craig, I'd say. Yeah.
When I run into him, he might say, "Hey, how are you? You didn't stand up for me when the Lynyrd Skynyrd's and Lynyrd, you know." And
what were you supposed to do?
He goes off, so I don't go see him, you know, because I remind him of bad times with Lynyrd Skynyrd. He's in such a good place. His band plays really well. More power to him. He's getting old, you know, because I'm getting old and Craig's getting old. But we all love Artemis, but we can't be around him because we remind him of bad times in his life, like serious bad times. We didn't come to help him.
Yeah.
You know, we couldn't. We were doing other things. But we drug him off the stage, and he had his own bus. So he had his own bus, and he had his kids there, and he had a little entourage who was hanging around with him, 4 or 5 people on his bus. And when the gig was over, we packed everything up and put in the truck, and we went and got on our buses and took off and went to the next gig. And we were staying at the Four Seasons Hotel in Toronto, I think it was. And he just stayed there for 2 or 3 days. And then he kind of realized, what the hell am I doing in Toronto with a bus full of people? And I'm not in the band anymore, you know, was probably his realization. And we just went on, and Kurt played drums just fine. All of a sudden, we didn't have to set up 2 drum kits. We just set up 1 drum kit. And that was it. That was just, you know, they slided him making the album, and it was Ed's fault. You know, Ed found a drummer to come, and the producer said, yeah, use the new drummer. And then, you know.
Well, you can kind of see why it would piss him off, but I guess there's a different way to handle it, though. You know, you don't want to throw a tantrum on stage.
But he could have just not played on the new songs and been Mr. Lynyrd Skynyrd on all the regular songs. And Kurt could have been the little side kind of guy. But
yeah, that would have worked out okay.
You know, but, you know, 2 drummers in a band, 38 used to have 2 drummers. When you have 2 drummers, it keeps the tempo down. The tempo can't run away. If you got 2 guys playing, if one gets excited, the other one will hold him back, you know?
Yeah,
it's good.
Kinda, right.
When you have 2 drummers, it keeps your tempo down.
The worst thing you can do is have a runaway tempo with a drummer. That's like...
Yeah, play Sweet Home Alabama too fast, and it sucks, okay? Yeah. But when you play it way down there, that's a slow-ass song, man, when you when you listen to it, you know? And a lot of songs are like that.
But the bass player helps out quite a bit with that too. I mean,
he can't hardly tell that drummer what to do, though.
Yeah, I guess that drummer does lead it.
You know, you can go, hey man, you guys got to slow down. You're just running through this set, and they will totally ignore you.
Well, see, we might have touched on that the last time you were here, but we didn't really go into that depth of it. And you know, being how Artimus, you know, he's the one that basically got you hired in there, and that's, you know, coming from somebody who's really close to him, you know, that we've heard several different versions. Everything pretty much matches up. Yeah.
But I accepted the challenge and I went and did it. You know, I could have been a fool and not done it and not succeeded and not, you know, I took a lot of shit when I first got there. I mean, you know,
but
Alan could cut to the quick, buddy.
The way you described it, though, it's funny because Pops, he's kind of like the last time when he was on, he was acting like, to this day, he can't understand why they didn't talk to him. Well, that makes sense. They wanted to see how he was going to act all If you do whatever you want to do, but if you can't, and remember, Craig, he said he did a good job, and then they were like, "Wow, you did great," and then he screwed up the Freebird guitar after that and ruined it.
Well, hey, when you're a guitar roadie, it just takes one broken string, and they will lose your trust for 5 gigs.
Oh yeah,
one broken string. It's not your fault, or something will happen, and you lose their trust until you get it back.
Yeah, we used to say that at NASA, and I worked there. You could do 500 operations and get 500 attaboys, but one aw shit will erase every one of those attaboys. So that's what they remember.
On tour, everybody's trying to be perfect, and you might have a screw up, and all of a sudden the video guys and the lighting guys and the sound guys are talking about your screw up.
Oh yeah, that happens in every job in any industry,
and it takes a while to get over that. But after you've been with the Lynyrd Skynyrd band, all the guys in the band though, they know you were their guy though. They knew Craig was there. If somebody's going to punch him in the face, they knew Craig was going to retaliate.
Is there kind of like a reputation for roadies that worked with Lynyrd Skynyrd, like with other bands? They say, "Oh, that guy worked for Lynyrd Skynyrd."
Hey, believe it or not, I do feel that. When I was doing cartage and stuff, and somebody would bring it up, or it was like that guy stuck out 15 years with Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do that,
But I tell them, I said, every band's the same. Every band has the same stories about the bass player trying to pick up a chick, and she happened to be the girlfriend of the leader of the bike gang. So the bike gang shows up to beat the band's ass. And whether you're in a bar band or you're in Lynyrd Skynyrd, it's the same story. It just happens to be in London or somewhere else other than down the street,
Well, Craig, you got any more questions for Mikey before we wrap it up?
No, I sure don't. No,
Well, Mikey, you're going to come back. You got a bunch of more stories.
Some skinformation, I think, on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't talk just about Lynyrd Skynyrd, but
Oh no, we talk about everything.
The whole industry and the whole thing. But the Skynyrd is the highlight. The Skynyrd is mystique. Things happen in Skynyrd that are can't be written. Like Lady Di getting killed in a car accident. You can't write that story. But things happen in Lynyrd Skynyrd. You can never write this. Right. Yeah, it's just a mystical kind of legendary things.
We don't ever really get to talk too much about Larry Junstrom and the fact that you were able to talk about him. That was pretty cool, because that's one thing not a lot of people know too much about Larry, and being around somebody that actually was in the band,
and he lived on the west side of Jacksonville. He had a modest little house. He saved his money. He was a good guy all the way around. And
I thought he was had a college degree. Maybe I got him mixed up with somebody else. I don't know.
We've never talked about college.
No, that was Jeff Carlisi.
Carlisi?
Finished college before he pursued his rock career.
Yeah, hey, Jeff was one of the few people that got to go hang out in Hell House.
Yeah.
There wasn't very many people that went out there. Jeff was allowed to be out there.
Yeah, there's a picture.
Jeff and Randall and Joe Crimp and that Gary, the bass player. I forget his last name. No, what was it?
Yeah, it was very few people that went out there, but Jeff was one of the ones.
Ken Lyons. Yeah.
But Jeff played on, Four Walls of Rayford. He used to play in the slide on that, or
they're at the Riverside, yeah.
And that
Kevin just dropped a mic down in between them, and they just him and Ronnie sit there.
Hey, did you ever talk to Kevin Elson?
Occasionally, I have contact with him. Yeah, just occasionally.
He went far. He was a total professional.
Oh yeah.
Skinners were lucky to have him.
Yeah, he's actually involved with that band I'm going to go see this weekend, Fortune Child, and he kind of promotes those guys, and they're doing really well. So they're I heard they got a bunch of new songs, Craig. So when I'm out there, I'll record it.
Yeah, Kevin did Van Morrison, Michael Jackson. God, he did. Yeah, I went to see Michael Jackson when Kevin was running sound for Michael Jackson, and I was sitting. It was raining, and I was sitting under the sound board with Kevin, and wasn't getting wet, and Michael's mother was sitting out in the rain.
See, it's another story, Craig. It just comes right out. We hadn't heard that before.
Hey, I was going to say, ML Prosite was our sound man, and he was Michael Jackson's front of house man too.
Oh
ML
yeah,
from Shoko.
yeah. ML was big shot down at Shoko.
Yeah, he was. He was a good guy. We had fun with him. Remember,
Yeah.
he had his wife on the bus, and she sat on his lap. She would not take a space up on the bus. She sat on his lap the whole tour.
Wow.
Vacation. They knew bus etiquette, and it was like, Anyway, we're talking about a guy, ML Proside. He was a sound man for Shoko in the old days, but he was a good guy. But he ended up doing Michael Jackson. But he also was running the sound Shoko company down in Dallas, Texas, before they merged with Clare Brothers Audio. But I love talking about the Skynyrd's. And if Dale Krantz is watching, hey Dale, because I don't get to see Dale, and after Gary died,
Yeah, I miss Dale. Yeah.
I hope he's doing really well.
Miss seeing talking to Dale.
I know you got a pocket full of money, girl. That's all I can say about that.
I think that house is still for sale, isn't it, Craig? I don't.
Yeah. I think up Georgia.
Turtle Creek. Turtle Creek, they call that.
Did you ever go out there?
I did.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you, Mikey. You ever go out there?
You know what? They're at an Ackworth, Georgia, okay? And my wife had a children's apparel store, and I drove up to a lady's house to pick up some displays for children's store. They were really nice. They had a little rabbit on top and all this. And I was talking to him, and she goes, "Yeah." I said, "My buddy Gary Rossington lives in town somewhere," and I didn't know where he lived. And her husband said, "I think if you just go down to the street here and turn left, and go down about a half mile, there's a road that juts off at a weird angle to the right." And he says, "I think he lives down there." So I was getting ready to leave, and I drove down, and I turned left, and I went down, and daggone, there's a street that jutted off at a weird angle. It kind of cut back. And I went down that road, and I went to the end of the road, and there was a farmhouse there. And I said, "That's not Gary's." And I came back up, and there was a driveway. And I said, "Oh, I'll drive down this driveway." And I drove down the driveway, and there was a little sign that said Turtle Creek, because there was a little creek there. And I went over the driveway up to the house, and it had a sign, "For sale, call the real estate agent." And I went up to the front door and looked in, and there was Gary's 52 gold Les Paul and his dobro, and a piano, and a picture of Dale and Gary up on the wall, And I looked around, and nobody was there. And it was,
man.
It had a for sale sign and stuff on it. So anyway, I went to their house, and they weren't there. I guess they were on the road. So and just by hunting and pecking, I kind of found their house, and it was really nice, real nice.
They would have probably loved to have seen you.
Well,
man.
there's cameras on that driveway. That's a real long driveway from what I
it is.
remember. And I thought there was a gate at the end of the driveway.
I think I didn't
But
see
you
a
go
gate.
up, and then there's a circular driveway right at the house.
Yeah, right in front right there. And I
It
think
seems like a long driveway.
He did a video. He did a video with that house in it.
I think the garage door was open, and I saw there was a sailfish on the wall, a stuffed sailfish. And I said, "Well, that's got to be the place if that's hanging on the wall in the garage. This is Gary's house." But when I saw the guitars and stuff, I knew it was their house. But I never talked to them and told them I went to their house. I never saw them after that. But it was just a chance thing, driving down there. But,
Did you ever ride in the Cabriolet, that Mercedes Cabriolet, the 53?
Oh, yeah. When Alan owned it,
Yeah.
Is that the one Johnny just got?
One Johnny just got, yeah.
Craig, we were driving across the Buckman Bridge, and it broke down.
We were
Me and you were driving in the Cabriolet.
in the Cabriolet, and it broke down.
Going across the Buckman Bridge, which is
That's
a
a
3 mile
terrible
bridge.
place to break down.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
So we pull over and we're standing there like, oh shit, we got to walk down to the end of the bridge another mile. And this guy pulled over in a Mercedes Gull Wing, like the 350 SL Gull Wing.
Uh-huh, yeah.
And we're like, this is one of the rarest Mercedes ever in the whole wide world. He
Yeah,
goes,
yeah.
he goes, we Mercedes owners got to take care of each other. And I think you might have jumped in or something. We went down and got some gas. I don't know if we ran out of gas or what. I don't remember that after that, but I remember the guy pulled over in a Gull Wing Mercedes and picked us up and took us to the,
God,
whatever.
I kind of remember that, yeah.
We were moving it from maybe, I don't know.
I drove that car a lot, yeah.
We were driving across the Buckman Bridge and it broke down.
Yeah, I guess Johnny's going to restore it. It looks pretty beat. It doesn't look dented or anything.
Well, it's just been sitting.
It's just
been
old.
Sitting for
sitting,
20
yeah.
years.
I don't think Gary ever drove it or nothing.
Whatever happened to that red car that
Steve Reynolds got that one, the Mercedes, the red Mercedes convertible that Alan shot a hole in.
Yeah, I was going to say with a gunshot in the passenger.
Alan shot
Did
that
he sell
door.
it? Did he still have it?
He
No,
sold it. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, when Alan got that car, it was pristine. It was like driving a sewing machine when you shifted it at 3 on the column, and clutch and everything, old school. But it was just like driving just the perfect machine. He bought it for his daughter, and he wanted to give it to his daughter, Amy. But he shot a hole in the side of it.
What
With a
didn't he
357,
shoot?
I mean, that was a big hole too. It went through the fence and hit the car. He was shooting at the bush. He thought the bush was a person. So he shot, and it went through the fence and hit the car.
He's lucky he never shot anybody, or they're lucky.
Yeah, that's why I quit hanging around him.
Yeah.
That wasn't luck. That was
That's
like,
why Sally Arnold said she quit, because
Yeah,
it
she
was
got
only
screwed.
it was only that bullet just missed Craig by a foot, and Craig, it was 2 feet.
Sally, she was an English girl. She was an English girl. She's laid down Sally.
Well, we had her on the podcast, and we didn't realize that her and Dean were engaged. We didn't even know that.
Yeah, me and Dean were like best friends. I never knew they were engaged. I never knew that.
I never heard they were engaged, but she liked everybody.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
She's got some stories. She's pretty cool.
Well, she was there.
Yeah,
she's
she was there.
got Rolling Stone Eric Clapton stories too.
Oh God, yeah, she was a great guest. But
she was like our manager when we worked with at one time Rossington Collins. She was like
she was our first road manager.
Yeah.
When we played over in
Gainesville. He lived out in Orange Park. Yeah.
There was something in Ron Eckerman's book that she didn't like, and we haven't heard from her since. I don't know. Well, because we were kind of promoting that book,
They put her up in a place called Club Continental. I think that's where Helen lives. Billy's widow. It's called Club Continental, and they were renting a place for Sally Arnold. And Craig and I had to carry a copy machine up the damn stairs up to that place. And we're carrying this piece of shit 300-pound copy machine up these stairs. And Craig had to stop. And I said, what's the matter? And he goes, my damn ankle and my wrist is killing me. And I didn't realize it was only like a year after the plane crash. He had healed. But he wasn't healed enough to carry a copy machine up a flight.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
Oh man, we had to drag that piece of shit up there. And
one of those big copy machines.
Back then, copy machines were 300 pounds.
Yeah,
they were huge.
Yeah, it wasn't just a little thing you put on the table. This was like a real copy machine. But she stayed at the Club Continental. That was a beautiful place. And I lived at Leon's at the time. I'd go sleep over on her couch over there. Because, from there, I could walk and get something to eat. Or go down to the donut store or whatever, donut shop.
Well, you were in the thick of it there, Mikey. You got to experience some cool stuff, man. You really did.
we had a good old time, I want to tell you.
All right, Craig, you ready to wrap her up?
Yeah, just we still got this camera, this Osmos 2 there that we're taking bids on from Robert Wheatley. And we're still Scott Parker at $3,000. You're still got the package deal, the high bid on that. And I mentioned Scott. We had a lighting guy named Scott Parsons, but Scott Parker, Carl Parker, was also on the lighting crew. Yeah, Carl Parker.
So you got two of them mixed up with the guy.
Yeah, Carl Parker. He was on our lighting crew. And Scott
We ran
Parker.
through a lot of guys.
But those guys died a few years ago. That's it's crazy. All the people that I used to know that have died, like John Nixon. We mentioned him, and he died a few years ago. And God, I just had one of my best friends that I grew up with. Lifelong friend died yesterday. The third.
Yeah, Craig called me up and was telling me all about it before he realized.
Yeah, I thought I was calling my buddy and telling him about my friend dying, and he's like, I don't know none of those people. I goes, oh, I called the wrong number.
I was thinking, because a lot of times Craig will tell me something and I won't, and I'll forget it. And I was like, oh, he's getting ready to get pissed off because I don't know who he's talking about. But I don't know who the hell he's talking about.
I dialed the wrong number.
Hey, there'll be times you'll be on a bus with somebody for 6 months and not see him for a couple of years and don't even remember him hardly.
God, yeah, I don't remember
so
them
many
names.
guys.
Do you remember Mitch Scooby? The
bus driver.
Yeah, he did Hank Williams Jr. Drove him around. Yeah. Oh. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play that video again, Craig, that of the Lynyrd Skynyrd collection,
the collection, the combination.
Paul Connolly. I'll put it at the end of this because we're promoting that for auction. So you guys, if you've already seen it, don't just go ahead and this will be the end. But if you haven't seen it,
it's a cool collection to look at.
Yeah.
So
all righty, let's wrap it up, man. Thanks for coming, Mike. Man, we'll hopefully you'll come back on.
Hey, give me a call anytime.
All right, man.
Okay, this has been another the Stoned Roadie show, and happy trails to you until we meet again, and see you later, alligator, at the Wild Crocodile. And I guess we're gonna watch Griff's video about the combination thing we got auctioning off here, and we'll call that a wrap with Mike Sparks, and see you later, alligator, at the Wild Crocodile. Bye.
Hey guys, Griff Martin here from the Stoned Roadie Show, Craig's co-host on the Stoned Roadie podcast. And I wanted to do a little video here today and put it on the podcast, and something that we can air on the next few podcasts, of a package of some Lynyrd Skynyrd memorabilia that comes to us from Paul Connolly, collector Paul Connolly. Guy's got amazing credentials. He gets a lot of his stuff, from other people. Some of it he gets himself. A lot of this Lynyrd Skynyrd memorabilia, he's just wanting to cut loose, and he wants to help out the podcast. Sometime back, he'd offered to sell some things, so some of the proceeds can go towards the Lynyrd Skynyrd plane crash survivors. And that's what we do here on the Stoned Roadie Show, is we like to help out the plane crash survivors. And this will certainly do it. It's a package of 9 items that Paul's offering up, and a lot of history with these items. And I'm going to go over them one by one here. There's 9 of them, and we'll just show you the pictures of them and give you an idea what everything looks like. If you have any questions or you want to bid on this entire package, which is not going to be offered individually, so we don't want anybody asking, hey, how much for this, how much for that? No, it's all one package. So don't be asking about onesie twosie stuff. This is all one package. And if you have any questions about any of the items in there, we'll certainly answer them. Questions and bids, you just email Craig at thestoneroadie@gmail.com, and we'll start the bidding out at whatever I deem the bidding starts at on the podcast, because that's apt to change. So here we go. We'll jump into it. All right, to start with, we got a 4x4 piece of cinder block that came from the Curtis Lowe store. The Curtis Lowe store, a history on that, man. Great song written about Curtis Lowe, you know. And that store was just torn down a few years ago. So, you know, this is a piece of Lynyrd Skynyrd history that, you know, that has been demolished, and just remnants of it. And Paul actually has a piece of that store that he's offering up. You know, this stuff you could put in a shadow box and display it. It's small enough where you could do that, where you could get it all in there. And this little piece of cinder block is certainly a great item from this collection. Next is a piece of foundation from the Hell House. Now, the Hell House is another building that's no longer around. A great history with Lynyrd Skynyrd with the Hell House, because that's where like 3 of the first albums that they made, where all those songs were written, and the music was made. Yeah, that's a great thing to have, is a section of the foundation where all the band members walked around, and there's, you know, there's some great history in that Hell House, and you'll be owning a piece of the slab. Next up, Hell House docks section. It's a 5x3-inch piece of Hell House dock wood. This is where Ronnie Van Zant stood just down from Hell House on Peters Creek, and he used to fish there and think up lyrics for his songs. And who do you know has a piece of dock wood from Hell House? You know, this is a nice size piece. That dock is no longer there either. The Hell House is gone. The dock is gone. Curtis Lowe store is gone. So you'll be getting a piece of the dock wood in this collection. Next up is a 5x7 photo of the original dock that is signed by Gene Odom. So you could put that piece of dock wood next to that picture in your shadow box. And it just depicts what the dock looked like right before they tore it down. And so that's another little piece, is the photo of the dock signed by Gene Odom. Next up, number 5, Lynyrd Skynyrd white colored fuselage, aluminum fuselage piece, which came from the plane. It's got the, the plane was blue and white, and this piece has the original white paint on it. So this was retrieved from the crash site. And so that's a nice little piece to have. And like I said, you know, this is all pieces of history from Lynyrd Skynyrd. And, you know, the plane crash is part of that. You know, you've just got a diversity of things in this package. And so, you know, what else do you need to complete it? It would be some parts from the plane. I think enough time has passed. You know, it's no different than having like a Civil War bullet. You know, some people might say, "Oh my God, you know, you've got a piece of the Lynyrd Skynyrd plane." You know, well, that's history of Lynyrd Skynyrd, and to me, it's a great collection item, and it belongs in this package. Number 6, a piece of the battery casing from the plane where some of the batteries were stored. You know, that's what helped powered the plane. And so you get a piece of another piece of the plane here. That's number 6, depicted here, the battery casing. Number 7, an 8x10 signed photo of the entire band in front of the Convair 240 plane that they were on when it crashed. And it's signed by Artimus Pyle. And of course, Artimus Pyle was the only band member that walked away from the plane and was able to go for help. So this is a great picture here that you can put in your shadow box if that's what you choose to do with it. Next up, number 8 is a picture of the plane, what it looked like when it crashed. This is what Dwayne Easley saw when he first walked up on the plane, the wreckage of the plane in the woods. And this picture is signed by Dwayne Easley, first responder, one of the first people that was at the plane crash and helping to remove the survivors from the plane and the people that didn't make it. Dwayne Easley, and he's been on the podcast, and for him to sign a picture of the plane, what it looked like when it crashed, really another really awesome piece. Okay, number 9 in the items of this package, and this is my favorite and the best piece of all. This is a piece of the headphone that either the pilot or co-pilot wore while they were flying the plane. Now, this piece was retrieved from the crash site. The pilot had it on his head, I'm sure, when the plane went down, and while he was flying the plane. Yeah, you're looking at the earphone, the part of the headset that the pilot heard instructions from Houston when they were flying the plane as what they needed to do. He communicated while flying the plane through this piece of equipment. So a very historical piece. We appreciate all you folks subscribing. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, like and subscribe. And if you're interested in this package and bidding on it, so you can reach Craig to bid on this, or if you have any questions about it, we can hook you up with Paul Conley. Now, like I said, these items will not be broken up. They all go into one package, so please don't ask, can you sell a piece of the Curtis Lowe store or the Dockwood? Not at this time. No, it's all one package. And we really appreciate Paul for donating all this stuff, and then the portions that we get out of this are really going to help out the survivors. So there you go. If you want to bid on this or questions, contact Craig at thestoneroadie@gmail.com. Happy bidding.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep token until then.